Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Monday, the 10th of July, 2023, and we have a lot to talk about today. The headline, so much weather going on out there, and I tell you, I got up this morning, I looked at Twitter, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. So much happening out there. The flooding in the Northeast and New England, the heat still very prevalent across the South and the desert Southwest, the very warm waters of the Atlantic, the Pacific, and all of this just adding up to a very active pattern, and we still have a lot of severe weather going on in July. Normally that calms down and a lot of the chasers can go home and get ready for hurricane season, I guess, but this year not the case, and I'll prove it to you. All right, let's get to it. I'll show you what's happening out there. First, a quick look at my Twitter homepage, and just I did a recent refresh here, and there it is. There's New England, a tweet there. This is more about what's going on in New York and elsewhere. And then, Michael Lowry here talking about the tropics, the subtropics. We'll get to that. More heat and fire danger out west, so forth and so on. And there's that severe weather threat, and enhanced for parts of Kansas and Nebraska with the slight risk up the rest of the Midwest and elsewhere. What? I mean, come on. This is supposed to be done by now. Maybe relegated to the extreme high plains up here into the Canadian border states. But no, it's right. I mean, that's what you would expect in May, maybe into June. Just crazy, crazy, crazy. And then this is really, really scary right here. This is what I talked about yesterday on a tweet that I had posted about the high risk for today. And there was a moderate risk yesterday for flooding up in New York, Pennsylvania. Some of the video coming out of Reading, Pennsylvania. This is very, very serious. I mean, this is the result of what that high risk can do. All kinds of stuff here. Tomer Berg posting some incredible stuff. This is some of the guidance suggesting even more extreme rainfall up here in parts of Vermont, and the way the orographic lift is going to come into play, where the mountains there, Green Mountains and vicinity, are going to wring that moisture out. Just incredible to scroll through and just see all of this in my timeline. Yes, I follow mostly weather, so duh, you would expect to see this, but this is very, very active and impactful. By the way, a phenomenal tweet here from Tomer. Incredible what he's able to do and code up. If we can get our crowdfunding up to a couple $1 million a year, I'm going to hire Tomer, and he's going to be our programmer. Holy cow, that is amazing and impactful too. Look, we can marvel at what we're seeing, but this means impacts on the ground, so there you go. Very, very active pattern out there, and we got to talk about it. So much weather to talk about today. Yes, we're going to get to some tropical stuff, but the weather impacts every single thing that we do. I am a geographer by degree. I study weather and climate impacts. Hurricanes might be my forte, but the other weather out there, impactful weather, just as important to me, and hopefully it is to you. So just a real quick glance here at the national weather map here from the Weather Service homepage. Yes, the Southwest, very hot as you'd expect, but even out here, it's bordering on ridiculous. The number of days, 110 degrees or higher for Phoenix and other areas. The low last night in Phoenix, by the way, was 91. That was the low. That's a hard pass. No thank you. Heat advisories for parts of Texas, even southern New Mexico, and you don't see this very often. You think Florida's hot and humid. This is bordering on ridiculous as well. I'm going to show you some very important tweets regarding that and the water temperatures around the Sunshine State. We'll take a look at that. And then, of course, here's the deal up in New England with Vermont, especially hard hit. Very, very interesting, impactful news making to start the week. A big culprit in all of this are the very warm oceans in the northern hemisphere. All right, and you can see there's way more of positive anomalies showing up than negative anomalies. You don't see very much blue, and that's because most of the global oceans are warmer than average. Now, I'm not going to get into why, because I don't know exactly why. I don't have the exact answer. They are warmer because of X. It is probably a combination of factors. But the bottom line, and that's what the result is, we all want to know, how's it going to affect us? We do live in a very selfish society, but weather, I think, is one area where that's okay. You can say to yourself, how will this impact me? and then you let it trickle down from there. I think that's a good game plan. But I think the baseline here is the very warm water temperature profile for most of the planet, and that leads to more moisture in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is warmer overall, and a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. So they go hand in hand, and you get these extreme events like what we're seeing. And I was really curious. I'm glad they brought this back, the Reynolds method, Dr. Richard Reynolds down at the Hurricane Center, and the methodology for compiling these isotherms, lines of equal temperature. You know, this is nice here, just to go back to the coral reef map. You know, you can look at these gradients in here, just kind of infer from the legend, but I like it when it's outlined with the isotherms duly noted. There's your 1 Celsius isotherm, line of equal temperature. That's what that means. And it's the entire subtropical Atlantic up here, the Northeast Atlantic, the entirety of the main development region, just a couple of patches here and there that are sub 1 Celsius above the normal, the average. But then you've got this large area of 2 Celsius, all right, and then most of the area around the Southwest Atlantic and into the Gulf, also 1 to 2 Celsius warmer than the 30-year average, or whatever it is that the Reynolds method is based on. Bottom line, a lot of extra moisture available. And then this is a very important thread here from my friend Jeff Baradelli down in Florida. He works in the Tampa market. Really interesting. I posted a tweet yesterday about how warm the water temperatures are around Florida. 30, 31 Celsius, the 31 Celsius isotherm. I'll show you in just a minute. I got to, actually, you know what? I got to pull it up in another tab over here. We'll do that real quick off of my website. And there it is right there. All right. Yeah, we can work live as stuff is happening. That's fine. Let's go back to Jeff, and then we'll get to this tab. Slide him over here. All right. So yesterday I posted this tweet about how warm the Gulf of Mexico was. Let's show that real quick before we get to Jeff's tweet thread. There's your 31 Celsius isotherm around Southwest Florida. Another area of it up there close to the north central Gulf Coast, 31 Celsius all around parts of Cuba. But then these little islands right here, these little isothermic islands as I call them, those are 32 Celsius. And a couple people were like, you know, it's like that all the time. You're making much ado about nothing. Well, that's not true. It has never been 31 Celsius over that large of an area. And you think a degree warmer than normal, a Celsius is not a big deal, but it is. It's so much extra energy in the ocean that is available, not just for hurricanes, but for rainfall events. The precipitable water values in the atmosphere are ridiculously higher when you have all of this extra energy out there stored in the skin of the ocean and the upper ocean heat itself, the heat content. You know, you got your surface layer of the ocean, that's very warm, but underneath that, the flesh of the ocean, also very, very warm. Now, the Gulf can be shallow enough in areas, and Jeff's going to mention this, I think, in his thread, and we'll get to it in a second, that yes, it can cool and heat pretty quickly, but a lot of the ocean temperatures that we're seeing are reaching down deep, and so the upper ocean heat content, not just at the surface, is also very high. And that leads to not just stronger hurricanes, potentially, but a lot more moisture. So even tropical storms that are slow moving can wring out a tremendous amount of moisture. We look at what Harvey did in 2017 as a great example of that. Ida coming up into the Northeast in 2021, high precipitable water values, wrung that out with nightmarish video coming out of parts of New York and New Jersey. We all remember that. At least we should, and let history be a guide for what could happen in the future. It's important and it's real. All right, so here's this thread from Jeff. Lots of talk about the very warm Gulf, specifically focused on South Florida. The sea surface temperatures, like right at the skin there, like I talked about, in the Florida Keys are 92 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I added that part because I know that's what he meant. That's boiling for them. Obviously, that's a figure of speech. More typically, it would be in the upper 80s. 92 to 95 Fahrenheit down here. That is crazy. The map shows departures from normal of 5 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to notice that. You're going to notice that if you go down there. And he says the bleaching alert status is at alert level 1. The scale goes to 2. I bring this up because coral is extremely sensitive to slight changes, just a few degrees. And so that's a big problem as well, the coral bleaching potential. What's important is the accumulated heat stress. It shows that it is 4 to 5 weeks or so. Significant bleaching occurs when the degree heating, the DHW degree heating weeks, as he says here, reaches 4 weeks. We're almost there. And so it's a very big problem, not just for the moisture, but for the marine life and whatnot in the oceans themselves. Notice this comparison. Just 2 weeks ago, the Gulf was cool. Remember this? I was talking about it. Like, why is this area so much cooler than we're used to seeing? And then look what happened. Everything has come up significantly because we've had a big heat dome. We've had a lot of light wind, westerly wind, and he's going to talk about this too. Off Tampa, water temperatures are not too far from normal. 90 during summer here is typical. With that said, South Florida has been especially roasting. Why? We've had a very odd weather pattern this summer, and the sea surface temperatures are responding. So he says for the first time that he can remember, they've had mainly westerly flow since late May. So like a month plus, very few, if any, days dominated by southeast trades. And so that has allowed the water temperatures to really rise in this area. And that could be a very big problem once we get towards the peak of hurricane season, not just for wind and pressure. In other words, don't think of it as, oh, you mean we might have an intense hurricane. Yes, that is possible, but you can get an intense hurricane if the atmosphere cooperates with water temperatures that are right at 80. You don't need 90, okay? I'm talking about the extra water vapor that is there. Wind, we can typically deal with. Water, not so much, okay? So I am more concerned about long duration, big time flash flood events. We even saw just last year with Ian, the amount of rainfall that fell in Florida. Florida had tremendous freshwater flooding. Usually we see that in the Carolinas as these systems interact with fronts. Last year we saw it, of course, with Ian in the Sunshine State itself. Just something to remember. All right, on to the tropics here. Most of the area nice and quiet over the next 2 days. We do have this potential for some subtropical development. What does that mean? Basically, it's coming from a non-tropical source. It's more spread out. The pressure gradient is wider. You're not having as tight a system, if you will. It's kind of a hybrid. That's the easiest way to describe it. And it would impact only marine interests up here if it does get going. And I say only. Hey, marine interests are important, from fishing fleets. I don't know how many people are fishing out in that part of the ocean, and I don't know what transoceanic commerce is going on specifically, but yes, the Hurricane Center is responsible for that. It's not just for us on land. In the East Pac, 93E, nope. I was wondering about that, and no, it didn't make it. And then we have 94E. This one is a little bit further to the south, so it has a better chance over the coming days to develop, and I think it'll do so riding a little bit more into the warmer zones of the eastern Pacific warmth, because, as I've mentioned a lot, right about here, the water temperatures really drop off, so this should be able to avoid that and become our next named storm in the eastern Pacific. Looking at the Atlantic Basin, yes, we do have a pretty good dust plume out here, but it's pretty thinly veiled overall, honestly. It's not that deep, jaw-dropping, wow, look at that massive dust cloud coming off. But yeah, we do have a pretty prevalent Saharan air layer, extremely typical to have it in July. It's a little bit atypical because, no, it is not particularly strong. That being said, there is a tropical wave there. There's another one here, but lots of mid-level dry air, some stable air out here, more stable air. There's even an upper trough sitting over here. You can't see it on this satellite imagery. I mean, if you look closely, you see how these clouds are kind of streaming like that right there especially? That's the sign of this upper level trough. And even right there, some more upper level winds. You just got to know what you're looking for. And there you go. That's kind of shredding that tropical wave just a little bit, which is, again, typical for July. Back to Jeff. Again, along the hurricane line of thinking, the topic here, moving on into that and staying with it generally. Interesting stuff here from the Euro, the ECMWF, the C3S multi-system seasonal forecast. Very important. He's tweeting this from Andrew Moore. seasonal modeling for August, September, and October to continue to paint an active hurricane season for the Atlantic. And I think this is an interesting word. The hope is that the El Nino shear acts as a wood chipper as storms near the Caribbean and the Gulf in the U.S., but we can't count on that. No. Hope alone cannot be a planning tool. I know it sounds cliche, but it is so true. I hear so many people say it. Well, hopefully it won't happen. And I hope it doesn't happen. And that's fine. Hope's okay. But remember in the Shawshank Redemption what Red said to Andy about hope. And if you hadn't seen the movie, check it out and you'll know what I'm talking about. Hope is okay, but you can't pin everything on it. And this is a very active look overall, especially in the eastern Atlantic and tropical Atlantic out here. Very robust signal. You get these things going. If the El Nino doesn't really crank up, there will probably be enough activity coming out that something will reach these areas of land farther to the west. It's just logic. It would seem to say, yes, we're going to have some impacts. We're just going to have to wait and see. But again, the modeling continuing to show a very busy time period as we get closer to August and beyond. All right? Interesting tweet here. I thought this was really well done from Dr. Ryan Maui. If we look at 2023 minus 2015, that's the last big El Nino, the Atlantic is significantly warmer so far in July 2023, while the entire Eastern Pacific is much cooler. What an interesting way to display the data. This is, if you take the 7-day average from all the way through July 8th and you take out 2015, you know what I'm saying? Like you remove that from the equation, this is what you get. And the Pacific, I mean, come on, that is markedly colder relative to average than we saw in 2015. So the Atlantic dominates overall. An interesting infographic there, map, whatever you want to call it, tweet from Dr. Maui. All right, also kind of related to that, I continue to just be stunned. The SOI, today's contributor, 9, the 30-day average, 2.21. We're not crashing yet, and until I see this just dive off and we lower those numbers significantly, indicating westerly winds coming across this region over here, I'm not going to be saying, hey, the El Nino is going to crank up. Until that happens, the SOI really crashes. It's just a day closer to everything coming together for a big hurricane season. That's just, I think, again, logic would dictate that. All right, moving on along to try to wrap things up as quick as I can. Speaking of the tropics, this is the tropical Atlantic. There is Africa right there, the eastern parts of North America over here. All these greens, there's your tropical wave there. There's another one there. Green is moisture. Brown is lack of moisture, or humidity in this case. And we scooch this out over the next week or so. And hey, look, there's that subtropical system. Dry air wrapping around the backside. More, it looks like a yin-yang, doesn't it? More moist air wrapping around the front. There's your look, your classic look of a subtropical system. It'll be over marginal sea surface temperatures and enough cold air aloft to create the instability. Probably going to be our next named storm, a subtropical storm, albeit, right? But it counts, and it'll be out there, again, only affecting shipping interest. And if we move this on out to day 7 and just rewind it, not much to worry about in the tropics. Again, something you would totally expect to see in July, and it matches perfectly. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Pacific, there's Invest 93 that didn't do anything. There's 94. Watch what happens with these systems as I move this out into time. 94 gets going, staying in that warmer area, and then I think it'll die quicker than that, honestly. And maybe a couple of other systems try to get going in the East Pac as well. Notice, too, finally, some of this moisture is snaking its way up through some of the heavily forested areas of Mexico towards the desert southwest. And let's just kind of scooch this on a little bit more. Oh, look at that. Some of those greens coming into Arizona. Yeah, that's a good sign. Maybe some monsoonal action because, guess what? I'm going to be going out there on the 20th. We'll talk about that later. But it looks like I might have some monsoon stuff to deal with. We're going to do some testing. Again, I'll talk about it later. We'll get there. All right, as I try to wrap things up as quickly as I can, I mentioned this the other day, Patreon now allows you to join without having to pay. And I think that's important because we do want to build a big community of people that follow what we're doing. And then when it's time and you want to help the project out or pay for the access to the stuff that is unbelievable, immersive, cameras, weather stations, all the stuff that we do in the field, you can do so. And then you can reduce that pledge later or just go back to being free, so to speak, without having to exit the building altogether. I like that. I think Patreon has done a great move and great service for its creators by allowing that. So head over to Patreon, get the Patreon app, search HurricaneTrack, and you can actually join for free. And then everything that I put that's public, you will see. And I just figure everything I do will be public until we get into a mission situation. And then the stuff, of course, has to be reserved for the people that are funding the project. And at that point in time, whatever your budget allows, you can do so. So applause, big hand to Patreon for doing that. I think it's great, and it'll grow engagement and the community as a whole over time, and that's what we want to do. Hey, I mentioned the other day that I was sold out. I didn't mean to tell a fib, but I accidentally did because I found another little, say, the company that I use to print these, they send them in these like cardboard packages of 25 each. I don't know why they just didn't put all 400 or whatever it was in one big box, like I used to get them from a previous company that did that. I don't want to name names, but whatever. They are great product, but they just packaged it weird. And so I had this box, like this little, it's like a huge envelope of 25 of them, and I found it over the weekend. I was like, I've got more. So yes, I do have 25 more, which is good because a couple people ordered them from an old video, didn't see that I said I was sold out. I was like, what am I going to do? And I happened to find this new stockpile of 25. So actually I've got 23 because 2 are spoken for. So anyway, if you want a paper map, I do promise that is the end of them. I looked around and know there are no more. That'll mark the end of it. I've got 23 left if you want to get one. $20, I'll send it to you. It helps fund what we do. But it also, more important to me, yeah, the money helps to pay the bills and whatnot, but you get a paper map. It's a lost art, in my opinion. So check out the description of today's video of so much weather, and you can get one for yourself or as a gift. All right? And speaking of YouTube and all the things related to that, a huge thank you to everybody that has been joining up recently and subscribing to the channel. It is awesome. I love your comments. I love the feedback. And it's just awesome to have you along, all right? So there you go. A big update today. So much going on out there. If you're affected by it, please stay safe. You mean everything to me. Without you, there's no reason for me to do this. I would still do it, but you make it more enjoyable, all right? Have a great rest of your Monday. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack. I'll be back with you tomorrow.